God promised to solve your biggest problem, my biggest problem, sin and death, through the offspring of the woman, the serpent crusher. He has kept that line alive through close call after close call. We almost lost it with Noah on a boat. We almost lost it with Abraham and Sarah battling infertility. Then when Isaac was a sacrifice. Then when Jacob almost got murdered by his brother. Then when Joseph got sold into slavery. Then when Moses was on the backside of a desert as a fugitive and he comes back. Then through the Red Sea, over and over and over, we come to David. And David faces Goliath and stays alive. He sins with Bathsheba. The kingdom splits, but the promise continues. What does that promise look like? How does it play out in the rest of the Old Testament? That's where we go to next. David was a man after God's own heart, but he was still a man and he sinned. And because of his sin, the kingdom ultimately splits. We come to the books 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Basically, you can read them at the same time. What's going on is the kingdom in the north, the 10 northern tribes, Israel, that's kind of the history written down in 1st and 2nd Kings. And it goes something like this. This king was bad, this king was worse, this king was really bad, so God killed him, ended the line, new dynasty. Bad king, ooh, good king. Bad king, end the line, new dynasty. Happens 3 or 4 times. Then you read 1st, 2nd Chronicles, which is the history of pretty much the same timeline, but in the 2 southern tribes in Judah. Remember, we're looking for the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So this is the one we need to watch. And that history goes like this. Bad king, worst king. God punishes them, and then this verse keeps showing up. But because of his promise to his servant David, he does not utterly destroy the line. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some super close calls. Let me just tell you about one because it's crazy. All right, so there is this king. His name is Ahaziah. He is from the line of David. He gets killed. His mom, the queen Athaliah, she wants to become the unchallenged ruler. So she actually orders a massacre of her entire family, anybody who's related to her, so that she can become the unrivaled ruler. Okay, we got 2 problems with this. Number 1, massacres are bad. We don't like those. Number 2, if she kills the whole line, we need David to stay alive. She's an old lady who's single. If she kills everybody, the line ends, we're hooped. Well, that's exactly what she does. She massacres everybody, and then we find out, oh wait, there was a nursery worker who stole, put the humanity back in this one. There was a nursery worker who stole a baby from the nursery, took him over to the temple where he was raised by priests. Okay? In your church, I'm pretty sure they make you sign your kid into the nursery and sign your kid out. Why? Because we don't want anybody kidnapped, because that's bad. But here in our story, this nursery worker kidnaps the baby, takes him to some priests, they raise him for 7 years, and then the baby, the child, his name is Joash, he comes out, lays claim to the throne, and becomes the king. This is the only kid on planet Earth who is from the family of David. So Athaliah did her best to wipe out everybody. But God is writing a story. And we had a nursery worker steal a kid, and the line continues. Well, we meet a new cast of characters. These are called prophets. Prophets are spokespeople from God, and they basically tell Israel and the kings, stop sinning. God's not going to put up with it. And leave us alone. God, leave us alone. Now, one of these priests, or one of these prophets in particular, Jeremiah, because all the prophets kept saying, you got to go back to the covenant you made with God and keep your end. Jeremiah says, let's not look back anymore. Let's look forward. And in Jeremiah chapter 31, he talks about a new covenant, a bigger one, a better one that doesn't rely on Israel and their obedience because they're horrible at this. And it actually involves more people. Okay, time out. I have no Jewish blood in me. So far through our whole story, it's been interesting. But it doesn't have anything to do with me because it's all about the Jews. And now we're talking about a new covenant where more than just the Jews are going to be saved. That's good because remember, God is on an eternal mission to reconcile all things to himself so that there will be people from everywhere, including me, gathered around the throne of the Lion and the tribe of Judah. So this new covenant, it sounds great. It's promising 5 things. Number 1, God says, I will be their God. Number 2, they will be my people. Number 3, they will know me. That's why we had priests. It's because we couldn't know God. Now we can know God. Number 4, I will write my law on their minds and on their hearts. No more tablets of stone. And then number 5, my favorite, there will be forgiveness of sin. The whole sacrificial system was because we kept sinning. You sin, you offer a sacrifice, and it covers that one. When you sin again, another sacrifice. Now we're talking about forgiveness of sin for more people. And did you notice how none of it said, if you do this, then I will do these things? God just says, I'm going to do it. And he stops relying on man because man keeps removing God from the equation. So God removes him from the equation. It's fantastic. So we've had close calls. We see Jeremiah offer the new covenant. We start to see God's character and his view of Israel. Micah promises that out of Bethlehem, of Judah, that's David talk, would come a ruler whose foretelling was from old and whose kingdom would never end. Again, a forever king out of Bethlehem of David, that sounds like a serpent crusher. And then we get to the book of Hosea. Hosea is a Jewish prophet who marries a prostitute as a picture. And just like the prostitute has been unfaithful to Hosea, Israel has been unfaithful to God. But God continues to love her and bring her back. Wow, isn't that a picture of God and his grace for us? Every time I sin, every time I remove God from the equation, he loves me and brings me back, just like Hosea to his wife. Then, okay, you remember we've been talking about God is on an eternal mission to reconcile all things to himself through the person and work of his son, Jesus Christ, so that one day, as we read about in Revelation 7:9, there will be worshipers from everywhere gathered around the throne of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. We start to see salvation trickle over into the nations. Israel was never supposed to be the end. They were supposed to be a means to the end of salvation to the nations, but they kept it to themselves. So God starts to bring salvation to the nations through some crazy means. Let me give you a couple examples. There's a guy named Daniel. His friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. You probably know them better as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're kidnapped. They're taken as slaves to Babylon, where through a crazy series of events, they show God's power and bring salvation to Babylon. Eventually, Babylon is conquered by the Medes and the Persians, and King Darius, the king, keeps Daniel and keeps him as a slave to work for him. Daniel preaches to him too. Salvation comes to the Medes and Persians. There's a Jewish girl who's taken captive by the Persians. Her name is Esther. Through a crazy series of events, she becomes the queen. And there is a plot to massacre the Jews, specifically the family of Judah. This is bad. Selfishly speaking, if this happens, you and I are going to hell. But Esther uses her newfound power as the queen to get the king to overturn the edict and to save the people, because God is writing the story and he is on a mission. One more. This one's crazy. There's this guy named Jonah. God calls Jonah to leave Israel to be a prophet for him to Nineveh of the Assyrians. Well, he hates them. So he says no. And he tries to commit suicide instead of doing what God says. He tries to commit suicide by drowning himself. But God is on a mission to recruit people from everywhere, including Nineveh. So he uses a fish to keep Jonah alive, swallows him whole, keeps him alive for 3 days, and then projectile vomits him onto dry land so that Jonah goes and preaches to Nineveh. And one day, you and I will be gathered around with worshipers from everywhere, including Nineveh, because God is on a mission. But overall, the prophets are ignored. God's hand is removed from the equation. And the people keep saying, God, leave us alone. So God takes his special people out of their special land, puts them into captivity, but they keep pushing. So he gives them exactly what they want. They want a silent God. So God gives them what they want. He steps back almost out of the picture. He's not gone. He's just waiting. But for the next 400 years, as you turn the page from the end of the Old Testament to the beginning of the New Testament, you actually turn the page on history, and there's 400 years. We call them the 400 silent years because as far as history goes, there's lots going on, but as far as God speaking, there is nothing. Nothing but silence.